In this group of lessons, we turn our focus to global patterns of air movement. But of course, we start locally. We center on the phenomenon different cities can have very different climates. For example, if you're planning a summer trip, it never rains in August in Yosemite, but August is usually the wettest month in Washington, D.C. How come these differences stay the same every year, and what causes them in the first place? A big part of that answer lies in the three-cell model of climate, which is a bit complicated, so let's break it down. You can actually understand that whole image by imagining your feet stuck in blocks of ice, just like the Green Ninja here. Your feet might be mighty cold, but what will happen next? Your circulatory system will move blood from the warm parts of your body down to the cold parts, trying to restore some semblance of equilibrium. And Earth works a lot the same way. The equator is hot and the poles are cold, and all the planet's wind and ocean currents, they work to balance the temperature by carrying warm air and water from the equator towards the poles and cold water the opposite direction. Of course, Earth has two poles, so maybe a better analogy would be to have two Green Ninjas. This would give rise to one big convection cell in each hemisphere. But that's not exactly what we see on Earth. It's much more complicated. But maybe we can explain why. We know that as air masses move from the poles towards the equator, they get deflected because Earth is rotating. That's the Coriolis effect we learned about. That causes the cells to get split into a few smaller cells. On Earth, we've got 3 of them. But look at the stripes on Jupiter. They are evidence of lots more convection cells. Jupiter spins twice as fast as Earth, so the Coriolis explanation makes a lot of sense. Why are these cells so important? Notice that the air always goes upwards at some latitudes and downwards at others. Well, clouds form as air rises up, so it's going to rain a lot more at the equator than it does near 30 degrees north or south where air sinks down. This explains why right at the equator we have tropical rainforests. And we can actually explain a huge amount of climate just by looking at these bands of latitude, like the Sahara Desert in a dry area with air sinking, or Seattle with all seasons wet, and most of California and the Mediterranean here at latitudes in between. So let's walk through the lessons where we introduce this to students. In lesson 3.18, students begin with a review of what they've already done in this unit using the Adopted Cities map and prompts. Then students view the weather and climate roadmap again, and they share ideas about why the temperature is so different in the cities in the picture. And next we address the question, what is climate? Students view the climate introduction presentation and they participate with the prompts. Finally, students begin collecting climate data for their adopted cities using the Climate of Your Adopted Cities worksheet. Students are going to record the yearly average temperature and precipitation for each of their cities. In lesson 3.19, we explicitly state our new phenomenon that different cities can have very different climates, and we wonder about what causes these differences. Students then pair up to discuss the climates of their adopted cities, and they use their prior knowledge to propose an initial explanation for why each of their cities has a unique climate. Next, students view the pressure and climate presentation, which introduces students to this well-established model, the 3-celled model. Finally, students regroup with their partner to brainstorm how the 3-cell model might help them explain the different climates of their adopted cities, and they revise their initial explanations. Up next, we'll keep exploring the effects of latitude on climate, but then we'll add mountains.